Welcome everyone to the next episode of the Meta History. Before, we've cycled through a few different eras of the game, but this one is more of a story of optimization. Midline meta just barely started, and it's going to take a long time to fully catch on and evolve. So let's get started right where we left off, consider subscribing or becoming a member, and we're going to jump straight into patch 6.1. It has more major balance changes since 6.0 didn't have too many major shifts. The first big change that comes from this patch is making Pencil more dominant. While it wasn't changed directly, the other three strongest cooler weapons were all increased in their special cost, basically just making them all worse by comparison. This especially hurt Tri-Slosher Nouveau, and from here on out it stopped being a cooler staple and was more often used in double cooler comps. In the meantime, edit splatting was able to keep up a lot better than people realized due to just how broken the main weapon was, especially back then when it painted better. It would still be absent for a long time from the Western scene and not be better than Pen for quite a bit, so we'll talk about it more when it manages to catch up. Finally, with Zap on the other hand, it actually got a notable damage buff this patch, increasing it from 28 to 30, improving its consistency with other 70 damage weapons. However, Zap very much relies on a very strong anchor option in order for it to be worth it, and from here on out, there isn't really any amazing option. The closest we really saw was just Red Pen, which isn't really too different. If anything, this problem only got worse because there was a slight random nerf to Ballpoint's long range mode, making it a little bit less accurate. Shot was also made 200p in this patch to reduce its special output, which, while a great change, only served to further enhance Pencil indirectly, since Zuka could threaten it. All of this basically means Pencil goes from great to dominant from here on out. On the midline side of things, Stamper got a slight painting nerf, which mainly hurt Crab Sword since its higher output of a more consistent special created a different playstyle, while Squeezer got a slight ink consumption and painting nerf, which made it more important to build around the weapon's weaknesses, basically making sure that you have a weapon that can paint a whole lot. However, both of these remained as some of the best options for quite some time. It is worth noting though that Squeezer's dominance from here on out did make it a lot harder for Stamper to see as much use, especially as the difficulty for the weapon kept increasing. Squeezer's mobility, wall, and easier kit with a good matchup advantage made it the more common midline, which is a trend that we would see for a while. But this patch did still have some positive changes. Notably, there were some buffs to Wavebreaker and Inkstorm, which increased the potential of other midlines like Dually Squelchers, Nautilus, and most notably, Range Blaster. As the meta shifts further and further into a midline focused meta, Range Blaster gets better and better. Cooler has already been a nice benefit for it, and so is Pencil with a reliable combo damage with it. But now it's especially important because there are going to be more mid-range weapons and more fighting in the meta. Range is especially good at fighting against other mid-range weapons because that's where it likes to space, and so it's a big positive for it, and I think this slight wave change only served to help enhance the weapon's rise. There were some other small things like Inkbrush being a bit faster and Flings and Dynamo having more consistent horizontal flicks, but these were more for niche situations as the weapons were only picked on a few specific maps or by specific players. As for changes in this patch, we tend to see a good bit more Squeezers, Sword, Nautilus, Range Blaster, Machine, Slosher, Tenebrellas, and 96 Gal Deco for midlines, while 2x Shot still managed to see some use at this time, though the main weapon trio that would start to become more common is Pencil, Squeezer, and Splattershot, with a varying degree of fourths, though usually another midline. Pencil and Squeezer's insane range made it tricky to take fights without prior damage, while the consistent Zuka output from Squeezer and Shot gave frequent power spikes and the ability for the comp to move forward, with every weapon having an easy time of working off of Pencil's high damage, which brings us immediately into 7.0, probably one of the least impactful patches in the game. This added very underpowered main weapons and lackluster kits. 52 Deca was the only one to see moderate competitive use, but it was mostly due to Screen being briefly overhyped, especially after it's buffed later. The balance changes also had basically nothing. 52 got slightly higher points for special due to it being an amazing solo weapon, and still a solid comp one. Luga and Mini got decent buffs, but neither of them would see drastic use at this time, and Reflux gets nerfed again in its pain output because of Turf War. Arguably the least important patch ever released, which means there's not really much new in terms of development, and we can jump again once more to patch 7.2, since 7.1 wasn't a balance patch. This one had a lot of smaller buffs, but what's most notable right now is that it toned back some midline and Zuka spam options in the points for special department, with Range Blaster now being included due to its continually increasing use, though Wavebreaker wasn't exactly a deal breaker here at 10 points higher. However, this patch didn't really do enough damage to change their increasing popularity. In terms of main weapons, S-Blast got a long range radius increase, which paired with other buffs over time have served to make it a decent option, though it's currently overshadowed by Range Blaster being a slightly easier and more reliable option. I also want to point out that Splattershot Pro and Dapples are other main weapons improving over time. All three of these are slowly increasing in their main weapon capabilities, and while they won't see too much main major use yet. They will be more important down the line. However, the biggest changes in this patch were to the specials. Mainly, Big Bubbler had its weak point strengthened, opening back discussion on if it could be a viable counter to Trizooka with it being considered one of the strongest specials right now, and a tipping point in Big Bubbler's viability. Screen got the damage buff I hinted at earlier, which allowed a little bit more 52 deco and full squeezer use for a little bit of time, though they still didn't stick around too long due to having other stronger kits. Not really a huge loss, honestly. Screen was implemented very poorly into the game, and to this day is restricted in comp because of that, so I can't say many people miss it. A few episodes ago, I mentioned that Kraken Cheese took a while to get fixed, and this was also the patch that did that, and last up on the changes list is Triple Splashdown, being 10 frames faster but a slightly smaller blast radius for the Splashdown and the Fist, which turned it from a bad special to a decent one that got custom Explo, a tiny amount of usage in Koshien, the qualifier for Worlds for Japan, and a Turf War event. Most of the developments that came around this time period were just a better understanding of the game. Midlines were talked about a lot more and generally classified better, and team comps were starting to really be centered around a support shooter, 2 midlines, and 1 cooler anchor. Though again, a little bit of Red Pen and Zap was seen sometime, and a little bit of Rapid Blaster Pro Deco as well. Midline pairs typically consisted of Squeezer, Sword, or 96 being paired with Range Blaster or Slosher, having one option that's good at standing in the open and one that has a version of AoE. By this time, having a little bit less kill power on options like the Sloshing Machines and Rapid Deco were starting to have those weapons drop off, and even Nautilus was being quickly overshadowed. It didn't help as well that Jetpack was only dropping further and further off as more midline options as well as Pencil continued to have better and better matchups at shutting it down. Big Bubbler wasn't exactly helping with that since it already was pretty good into Jetpack and would only get buffed into it later because of solo queue. We did also manage to see a little bit more Big Bubbler weapons like Zimmy and Roller, but Junior was the main one to directly compete with Shot. It had some moments of success, but it was a lot harder to get in without a shooter getting a consistent entry tool, since the midlines had much lower special output. It was clear that Bubble was a lot better, but Junior wasn't the easiest option to slot into comps though. Running 2x short range shooter was basically done by now, but the big answer is would there be a more consistent short range option? Because Junior wasn't working as well for the entry, Zap was dropping off because of Pen, and running Shot and Squeezer seemed a little inconsistent as people got better at dealing with Zuka. But there was one option that seemed to be better. One more buff I haven't mentioned in this patch is Neo Splashomatic, going from 210 to 200 points for special. And while this development continued into 8.0 before it really caught on, Neo Splash would end up being the answer short range needed. Having a special that was more consistent allowed the short range weapon to be mostly responsible for paint and not having to fight as much, and most importantly, also serving as an answer against bubble comps that were being used against Double Zuka. It ended up being the perfect choice. But like I said, that didn't catch on immediately though. And before we get into that, we have Sizzle Season 24 and Patch 8.0 dropping on June 1st, 2024. This introduced 2 powerful new main weapons, the Decapitator and Wellstring, which also uniquely had both their kits. Mint Decapitator saw some early tournament success, but was generally seen as a worse stamper, and struggled a lot against Squeezer and Range Blaster, though it was still a notable new bubble option. Custom Wellstring did have one breakout tournament where it almost won an area cup, with its insanely high object damage being great into wall and any bubble comps, as well as a heavy location kit with great uptime and good combos with meta options like Sword and Slosher. However, Wavebreaker just was not valuable enough of a special to warrant it, especially on the backline slot, and the main weapon still had some trouble in 1v1s. A solid option, but mostly overshadowed by Pencil. In the balance patch, Tri-Stringer and Reflex got great buffs, and this finally put Reflex at a point where it could see some decent tournament use between both of its 2 kits, occasionally making podium appearances in area cups, though not a staple threat outside of Turf still. Part of that was also due to Slider getting a major buff in this patch, allowing it to paint with its rails and trap opponents. Being paired with the ability to cheese zone, which was stronger at this time, Slider was finally starting to be a usable special. During this time, not too much change in tournaments. We did see some unique comps like Roller and Carbon being ran with Mass Quick Respawn and Double Tacticooler, typically with Zap, Edit, and Squeezer. These faster paced comps gave a lot more chances to run down midline slower weapons, though suffered heavily on lockouts due to inconsistent and lacking retake options. It was very risky and volatile, but a cool alternative for Roller players. Some perception changes of other specials would continue to evolve here, like Jetpack falling off further and displacement options like Missile and Whale being seen a little bit more strongly, but for the most part there was a clear set of specials above everything else, which would be Cooler, Stamper Zipcaster, Tri-Strike, Zuka, and Crab Tank. With the field and midlines drastically narrowed down and the short range roll fully optimized, comps started to get very standard, with Squeezer, Slosher, Neo Splash, and Pencil being the best one, with Range and Stamper not far behind, as Range and Slosh's powerful AoE pair was seen a lot more in the Western scene, especially given that CRB just released, with a kit giving it a special for more powerful aggression. Finally, it's worth noting that part of this meta development was also some stage reworks that made them a little bit more open. To wrap things up, we can speed through patch 8.1, which once again had a lot of smaller changes, the most notable one by far being a buff to Carbon Roller, increasing its horizontal kill range and vertical hitbox, making it more comparable to Splat Roller's strength, and S-Blast being a whole 5 frames faster, being more worth it but still overshadowed by range. Trizuka and Jet were made weaker into Bubble, solidifying that as a weakness for them, and Kraken was made slower, drastically lowering the power of primarily CRB and 96 Deco, the latter of which was already losing out to Squeezer. Finally, Slider got a massive 70 radius in exchange for less consistent zone cheese, an overall very important buff that we wouldn't see the effects of quite yet though. From here on out, the meta didn't really change much. It has reached a nearly fully optimized state, and that's not that surprising. The previous 4 episodes of this series spanned an entire year of balance patches, but this one spans an entire year by itself, an entire year of evolving and working towards midline meta. While of course powerful main weapons and increased fighting power were fun, it did have its problems. It was very stale given how long it lasted, the short range shooter was basically a paint bot, rolls felt very stagnant, and entry tools were a little bit more limited with the lower special output. Coordination also just wasn't as big a factor, which some people have missed from Splatoon 2. But now, after a year of dealing with this meta, Nintendo gave a warning that the next patch, 9.0, would be focused on nerfs, finally giving a chance to shake things up. But would this take advantage of the healthy parts of the meta, or just make it worse? We'll have to revisit this question in the next episode.